Hebron. We've been studying for quite a while on David's been anointed, and then all of the different trials and tribulations that he went through, coming to the throne, and now finally in chapter 2 and verses 1 through 7 of 2 Samuel, he is anointed by the people of Judah to be the king. And so now we've seen all of the different kind of trials in the history of David's life that come upon you when you're in want and alone and having to flee for your life and those kind of things. But isn't there a whole new set of challenges that come when you enter into prosperity? And a lot of times people, as far as their soul is concerned, don't we a lot of times get in more trouble when everything's going good than when everything's going bad? So there are going to be a lot of trials come to David in the remainder of his life, in his days of prosperity that he's enjoying. Every time we've seen that he has problems and gets into trouble, it's like with all of us. When we fail to do things in the way that the Bible says, we fail to consult God's wisdom on how we ought to behave ourselves. And as a result, we make serious errors and mistakes that lead to bad consequences, because all of God's laws and his decisions are all for our good. They're all to try to keep us on the right path of pleasing him and doing what's best for others and ourselves. And same way with David, he's going to make many errors. So being a man after God's own heart doesn't mean you're a sinless man. Doesn't mean that you always do the right thing, even, because David certainly doesn't. But he does know who God is. And he never even thinks of worshiping an idol or following any false god. And when he sins and it's revealed to him, he repents and he comes back to God and gets things straightened out. But we learn a lot from his mistakes as well as the good things that he does. So in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Then it came about afterwards that David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to one of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, Go up. So David said, Where shall I go up? And he said, To Hebron. And so David went up there with his 2 wives, also Ahinoam the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. And David brought up his men with whom that were with him, each with his household, and they lived in the cities of Hebron. And then the men of Judah came, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, It was the men of Jabesh-Gilead who buried Saul. And David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh-Gilead and said to them, May you be blessed of the Lord, because you have shown this kindness to Saul your Lord, and have buried him. Now may the Lord show loving kindness and truth to you, and I also will show this goodness to you, because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." So that's where we left off last time. I forgot about the questions. Why don't we look quickly at the questions on chapter 1 that we studied last time. This is chapter 11 in the workbook. First question said, what differences exist in the accounts of the death of Saul in 1 Samuel 31 and 2 Samuel chapter 1? What's the discrepancy in those 2 accounts?
One told the Amalekite narrative was false, and Saul's was Saul's true story when they committed suicide.
And of course, one of the basic differences in the 2 stories, the false story and the true story, was what was the difference between the 2? What got changed when the Amalekite? Now, the Amalekite said he was still alive. He didn't kill himself, and he, killed him out of mercy, and took his crown and brought it to David. But he actually just found him dead and took his crown, brought it to David. But as a result of his lie, let's see. Question 2 says, "What motivated the Amalekite to give this account of the death of Saul?" Why would he tell a false story like that?
Greed.
Greed. he was looking for a reward. He thought the king would be happy that Saul was dead, and he would give him a reward for being the one to kill him and bring him the news. Question 3 says, what sin did the Amalekite commit? Did I hear something?
Lying.
Lying. That's certainly, and what was maybe worse than, well, lying's bad, but he killed him too. I already said he killed him. He lied about killing him, but David said the reason he put him to death is you killed the Lord's anointed. So he claimed to have murdered the king. Question 4 says, then David lamented over the death of Saul and Jonathan. How did he describe the two men? Some of the things he said about him in that song he wrote.
Beautiful, swift, and strong.
Swift and strong. Great warriors that brought many riches to Israel and so on. So, he mentions their good qualities. How did David describe his love for Jonathan? How great a love was it?
More wonderful than the love of women.
He loved him more than any woman that he loved. He was his very best friend and had a special affection for him. Why did David go up to Hebron? The next question says, kind of touched on that. He was told to by God. He got an answer from God about whether to go up and where to go. And the message from God was to go to Hebron. So he didn't take any of this on himself presumptuously. The event occurred there that we just talked about.
David was anointed king of Judah.
He is anointed the king of Judah. He's reached that high position now. And as we pointed out last time, of course, that's got to be gratifying that this great tribe, the tribe that Jacob, had when he blessed his sons. And in Genesis 49, he said that the ruler's staff would be between the feet of the tribe of Judah, right? That it would remain there until Shiloh comes. The one who brings peace was Jesus Christ. So the rightful rule was prophesied ahead of time. He's going to come to the tribe of Judah. And now David's been anointed the king over the tribe of Judah. And later he'll be anointed over all of Israel. So David had 3 different ceremonies before it's finished. He got anointed by Samuel when he was a young man to be the king. Sort of like when Jesus was baptized, he was anointed by the Holy Spirit to be the Lord and Christ. But he didn't take the throne until after his resurrection from the dead, and he ascended up and began to rule at the right hand of God. Now David has ascended and begun to rule. And then his rule is complete. There's still the tribes of Israel that are going to be brought to David, and he'll rule over them. And sort of in a sense, when you're studying the book of Revelation, I was thinking, it says, now the kingdom of the Lord has come, when the Romans were judged. And it was confirmed that Jesus is the king. When you're reading in Revelation chapter 12, chapter 11. And so you have kind of several different times that this rule is confirmed over and over again. David's being politically astute and, honest too, I think, in congratulating those men of Jabesh Gilead that went and rescued the body of Saul and brought it down off the wall and showed respect for their Lord that had delivered them in the early part of his reign. And he mentions to them that he's now been anointed over Judah, and that he's eventually going to be recognized as the rightful king over all of those northern people as well in Israel. So he shows them great respect for what they did and for the way they treated their Lord at that time. Then Ishbosheth is made king over Israel. So we find out Saul had another son, not mentioned before. Some think maybe he might have been an illegitimate son, but they find this Ishbosheth. When there's a list given later in Chronicles, he's the 4th one that is mentioned. 3 of his sons died with him in battle. So maybe Ishbosheth was younger and he wasn't in the army, and why he hasn't been mentioned yet. Maybe he wasn't a legitimate son of the king, but he has royal blood in him, so that's the reason. Abner, the general, picks him out and sets him on the throne to be king. So it says, but Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. And he made him king over Gilead and over the Asherites and over Jezreel and over Ephraim and over Benjamin, even over all Israel. And Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he was king for 2 years. And the house of Judah, however, followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So we have set forth in the text that Ishbosheth comes to the throne. He has another name that is given in Chronicles to describe this man. He's called Ishbaal. Isn't that an unfortunate name to have? And makes you wonder why he would have been named Ishbaal. And they changed the name Baal to Boseth, which is shameful. So he is a shameful man, Ish. So he was a man of Baal, and now he's in this account. They changed his name to man of shame. So shows they didn't like to use the name. Maybe in the time of Samuel and the time this book was put together, they're showing their disdain for the name Baal. They don't even want to use that name. They just give it a euphemism, or they give it another name of shameful. So I don't know in what way Saul would have named one of his sons Baal. Or related that to Baal. We never read anything about him worshiping Baal. But it sure is a poor, the word Baal means Lord, but it's idolatrous Lord, right? That's what you think of, that idol. And so anyway, it shows they consider this a shameful man and a shameful name, not very highly thought of at all by the Bible writers. And 40 years old, he reigns for 2 years. So there were 7 years. It's sort of a mystery according to different scholars and commentators that I read today about when the 2 years was. Was it David was anointed and Ishbosheth was anointed, and then that doesn't seem to fit, because later Abner's going to try to turn the kingdom over to David. So was Abner running things for 5 years, and then he put Ishbosheth on the throne, and he reigned for 2 years, and then he gets killed, and David takes over? Or some of the chronology, there's kind of some mystery as to exactly what 2 years it was. Did he reign 2 years, and then Abner kind of broke away from him and just kind of ran things himself? He was just a figurehead, and the Bible doesn't count the rest of the 7 years. Maybe it's the other way around. So anyway, you've got 7 years with David ruling, and Ishbosheth is actually, according to the text, recognized as really the ruler for 2 years is all. And the rest of the time, somebody else is, Abner is running things. He's sort of the power behind the throne. He's the son of Saul's uncle. He's the cousin of Saul's, and commander in the army, and a mighty person. And I guess we can look at this map, kind of point out these places. You can see remember the Philistines invaded the land and took over the central part of the land up here. And now they're ruling at Mahanaim, is this red line there, the dot there. So he's got his kingdom over there, and David is way down here, down in Hebron, way down in the south. Is where David is at. It mentions the Asherites, which are up in the northern part of Israel, and then it eventually mentions the tribe of Benjamin especially, and then it says all of Israel. That whole territory to the north of Judah is being reigned over by Ishbosheth.
Hey, Billy,
Yes.
you don't think his name has anything to do with him being an illegitimate son?
Could be. That might be part of it. Man of shame. Maybe he had some kind of, the concubine or the mistress or whatever. Maybe he was a Baal worshiper, and that's why he had that name. That's another possibility. It's just, we're operating with no information other than his name. There's a lot of, I don't know why he got that unfortunate name, but we know the writer of Samuel doesn't like the name Baal. He substitutes shameful instead. And you'll find several Bible names like that. The Chronicles will call them one thing, and the books of Samuel will call them something else, because they substitute like that. It's sort of like the Jews, they don't want to use the name Jehovah, so they say Lord instead. We see that in the Bible a lot. They'll substitute a word where they don't want to use that other word when they were writing it. So they change it from Baal to Boseth. So then in verses 12 through 17, you see the unfortunate state of Israel. Well, they're divided between the rightful ruler that God has said should be the king and some heir of Saul who's been rejected. But the northern tribes are following him. And it's always a sad thing and a terrible thing for the kingdom of God when people are divided, right? When the church is divided, people don't believe like they would otherwise when we try to talk to them. And there's a lot of hurt that comes upon the church. Didn't Paul say, be careful lest you bite and devour one another in the book of Galatians? So we know that it can become bad when God's people are divided against one another. And that's what you have in the state of the kingdom at this time, with David in the south and Saul's son reigning in the north. It says, now Abner the son of Ner went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon with the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and Joab the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, one on the one side of the pool, and the other on the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, now let the young men arise and hold a contest before us. And Joab said, let them arise. So they arose and went over, by count, 12 from Benjamin, and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. And each one of them seized his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so that they fell down together. Therefore the place was called Helkath Hazarim, which is in Gibeon, means the field of the sword edge, was the meaning of the word. That day the battle was very severe, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. So it's a shame. There is this division in the kingdom of God, and they have these two generals, Joab, the general over Saul, David's men, and Abner's the general for Ishbosheth in the northern kingdom. And they have this contest, a deadly contest, where they almost have this one-on-one combat between 12 on each side. And what's the result? All of the young men are killed. They all kill each other. Well, that was great. What happens when there's division among God's people? It hurts the young men. It hurts us all when things like that happen. And then a war breaks out between the two, which maybe was why this contest was suggested in the first place. They knew it would lead to something like this. And a battle takes place, and it's a very severe battle. And Abner and the men of Israel are beaten by the servants of David. And they finally retreat to a strong position on a hill. And Abner is ready for these things this conflict to come to an end. Here, where the Zeruiah, this is Zeruiah is David's sister. So Joab and, we can look here at the different sons that come. Here's the family of Judah and Tamar. Then it goes to Pharez, and then down to Ram and Abinadab. Finally, you get down to Solomon and Boaz and Obed and Jesse. And then there's David, and his sister is Zeruiah. And it's her three sons that are important servants in David's kingdom. Asahel is the youngest of those brothers. Abishai we've read about. Abishai is the one that was going to kill Saul with the spear. He said, I won't have to strike him a second time, and I'll stick him, right in the ground. When I kill him, I won't have to do it again. He's a mighty warrior. That's, David's nephew. And then also you have Joab, who's the oldest brother. He's going to be very important in the story as a general. And David has all kinds of trouble with these cousins. They're very powerful in David's family and in the kingdom of David. They have important positions, and David has a hard time reining these guys in. And they're constantly a problem for him. So we're told then about this battle, and Abner's going to end up killing one of these brothers, which is going to lead to big problems. Starting in verse 18, it says, Now the three sons of Zeruiah were Joab and Abishai and Hazael. And Hazael was as swift-footed as one of the gazelles which is in the field. So he was known for his great speed. You can see one writer was saying it was a great advantage in battle to be fast. And I was thinking the same thing in football. I always think in terms of football, but I think you can't coach speed, right? If you guys got speed, that's what they're all looking for. Oh, you got a big recruit today. I'm sure he's fast. That's probably one of the things that made him desirable, is he was fast. And Asahel pursued Abner and did not turn right or to the left from following Abner. And Abner looked behind him and said, Is that you, Asahel? And he said, and answered, It is I. So Abner said to him, Turn to the right or to your left, and take hold of one of the young men for yourself, and take for yourself his spoil. But Asahel was not willing to turn aside from following. And Abner repeated again to Asahel, Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab? So don't go find somebody else that you're going to fight and take their property or spoil. And here you got the old wily general. I mean, he didn't get to that position without being a great warrior. He wouldn't be the guy you'd want to pick on in the battle. He's probably the fiercest warrior they've got, but he keeps chasing him. And he won't turn aside even after he tries to warn him off. And you can see how quickly he's going to be able to dispatch him in verse 23. However, he refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the belly with the butt end of the spear, so that the spear came out of his back. And he fell there and died on the spot. And it came about that all who came by the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. Well, everybody is just shocked when they see that. This great warrior struck down. Didn't take this wily old guy very long to dispatch him, did it? He's chasing him full speed, and he's awful fast, and he just stops. Puts the spear back, and they always sharpen the back end of their spear so they can stick it in the ground. It goes right through him and out his back. So all that speed didn't do him much good. At the end, and brings about his death. So he dies in battle. Abner even tried to warn him off. He didn't want to kill him, but it's either his life or Hazael's life. I mean, that's what it came down to in hand-to-hand combat and battle and a war. And so he's struck down and killed, and people see his dead body there. And the battle progresses until evening, and we're told that there's a call by Abner and his men from a hill to stop the killing and the fighting. It says, But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and when the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which is in front of Giah, by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. And the sons of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner, and became one body, or one band. And they stood on the top of a certain hill. And then Abner called to Joab and said, Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the end? How long will you refrain from killing the people to turn back from following their brothers? And Joab said, As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely then the people would have gone away in the morning, each from following his brother. So Joab blew the trumpet, and all of the people halted from pursuing Israel no longer. Nor did they continue to fight anymore. And Abner and his men then went through the Arabah all that night. So they came across the Jordan and walked all morning and came to Mahanaim. So there's a call here to put an end to brothers killing brothers. Isn't that a shame that come to this? That the people of Israel wouldn't have recognized the prophecy of Samuel and decided we need to set aside any bitterness from the past and accept David as the king. And wouldn't it have been good if David hadn't gone over and left the land and went and lived with the Philistines and maybe caused a lot of suspicion in the minds of the Israelites, to where they didn't want David to be the king right away? There are a lot of decisions that we make that can lead to a lot of trouble in God's kingdom. And that's what had happened. But finally, they come to their senses. If they had tried to take this hill, how many people would die? You know, they had the high ground, and Joab finally blows the trumpet, and they break off the fight and go back. So both sides retreat. Joab goes back to Hebron, and the men of Israel return and go back to the land across the river. Verse 30, it says, Then Joab returned from following Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, 19 of David's servants, besides Asahel, were missing. But the servants of David had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 men died. And they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which was in Bethlehem. And then Joab and his men went all night until the day dawned at Hebron. So they go to Bethlehem. That's the city of Jesse and David. That's where they lived as well, and buried their brother there. Then they come back to David at Hebron. You can see a great many men died. I don't know if the 20 servants, counting Hazael, are killed besides the 12 that got killed in the one-on-one combat. Maybe there was another, maybe it had been 32 if you counted them. But anyway, maybe they were included in the 20. But you can see the men of David, they certainly had the upper hand in this battle. And it's going to go that way between the two kingdoms. David's going to get stronger and stronger, and Ishbosheth and the others are going to get weaker and weaker. David and his men they have the Lord on their side. That's the Lord's will that David reign. So we have a period of these two kingdoms that continues here in chapter 3. So their war continues. Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. And then we're told about the sons of David. It says sons were born to David at Hebron. His first was Amnon of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, and his son Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And the third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And the fourth was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. Was Ithram by David's wife Eglah. And these were born to David at Hebron. So David has this large family where each of his wives that he's married in this polygamous relationships that he's formed have sons. And we know God's will from the beginning, according to Christ our Lord, was there should be one man and one woman for life, right? That's God's law. That is what God intended from the beginning. But men have hard hearts, and they've sought out different ways that are contrary to God's will. Under the Old Testament time, because of the hardness of men's hearts, God just regulated some of these innovations of men, but he shows his disapproval for it. And the history itself and the way things worked out in these families where you have polygamy shows that it's a very poor idea to depart from God's purpose for marriage. We can see that back at the time when Jacob had 2 wives that were sisters, right? And all the trouble that arose between those children and all of the problems that arose that God doesn't approve of it. And we're told just in the history and the way it all worked out, polygamy is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. It's contrary to God's will. And the same thing in David's family. You might think, well, this leads, they have a lot of wives and a lot of children and make a stable situation for your kingdom, but that's not what happens, is it? One son rapes the daughter of another one of the wives, and then that brother seeks revenge and kills his brother, and then he has to flee the land, and he gets welcomed back, Absalom, and his father really doesn't welcome him back all the way. He kind of leaves him in limbo, and he becomes a rebel against his father. So all kinds of problems arise out of this polygamy and about the way that his family is structured. There's all this rivalry and bloodshed and rape and all kinds of things going to happen. That's not the way God intended the family to be, certainly. And you see what happens when men think they got a better plan. It's not ever a better plan. And we're going to see it all worked out here in the life of David. So Abner then gets accused of rebelling against Ishbosheth in the northern kingdom. It came about that while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. And now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone in to my father's concubine?" And we see this arise also with Adonijah later, that he's wanting to marry this young woman that was married to his father David. He never had relations with her. But Solomon interprets that as you're trying to take the kingdom. And the same thing happens here. So it must have been a kind of a rule that nobody marries the concubine or wives of the former king. If you do that, that means you're trying to take the kingdom over. And that's what he gets accused of here. And it's a form of treachery and rebellion, and you're being disloyal to the king, that you would do this. And so he's accusing his uncle here of this. And then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I showed kindness to the house of Saul your father, and to his brother and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hands of David. And yet today you charge me with a guilt concerning the woman. May God do so to Abner and more also, if as the Lord has sworn to David, I do not accomplish this for him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul, to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba." And he could no longer answer Abner a word because he was afraid of him. So we learned a lot of things about the dynamics between Abner and Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth is a weak king. Abner's really got all the power. And as soon as he accuses him of trying to take too much authority and take this woman, well, he's not afraid of the king at all. As a matter of fact, he threatens the king. He tells him right to his face that there was a prophecy that David's supposed to be the king, and I could just deliver the kingdom over to him. All kinds of speculation. Was he really with this concubine and wanting to take the kingdom for himself? I don't know. That's what he gets accused of. And he takes it like, you're accusing me of doing something wrong when I'm really not. So I don't know who was right about that. But you can see the rift that happens between the general here and the king, and how weak the king is, that he won't stand up to him at all. He doesn't even answer him. When he says, "I'm going to work to give the kingdom to David." It makes you think something about Abner, that he had heard this prophecy. People had heard about David being anointed king. And Saul made reference to it. When David spared his life, he said, "I know you're going to be the next king." Jonathan said that. So evidently, even though it was done in secret that Samuel anointed him, word got out, and people knew about it, that David was the one that had been appointed by God. So it's kind of a shame that they're resisting that, isn't it? Why aren't they just going to David and we wouldn't have all this trouble? But they want to be loyal to their family, I guess, the house of Saul. They don't want these men of Judah on the throne or whatever. I don't know what all of their motivations were, but they weren't doing what God wants. God said David should be the king. It's going to take them 7 years to come around to that. And all this blood is going to be shed. So he takes an oath there in the name of God. He's going to turn things over to David. And then he begins to try to carry that oath out and trying to turn the kingdom over to David. So, verses 12 through 16. Says, and Abner sent messengers to David in his place, saying, whose is the land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you, to bring all Israel over to you. And he said, good, I will make a covenant with you, but I demand one thing of you, namely, that you not see my face until you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see me. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, to whom I was betrothed, for 400 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. And so David hasn't forgotten that his wife was taken away from him when he was out of town and given to somebody else. Because we're not going to make any kind of deal until you send my wife back that I paid for and risked my life and became the son-in-law of Saul. Don't you think that also be a major claim to the throne, that he's married to Saul's daughter? And that also, just thinking of it from politics, that David knows how to play that game too. Right? He says, you make sure before you ever come talk to me, my wife is brought back to me. Some people argue, well, in the book of Deuteronomy, if you divorce your wife and she becomes the wife of another man, you can't take her back. But David didn't divorce her, did he? That's not what happened. Saul just took her and gave her away to somebody else. So you can't hold David accountable for that. He wasn't party to that at all. They just stole his wife. So he says she's got to be brought to me first. And it's interesting, David doesn't just bargain with the general. It says he sends messengers to the king. So he's working with both of them, saying, if you're going to negotiate, you need to do this first. And Ishbosheth goes along with David's demand. So it shows again his weakness. His general is working out a deal to hand the kingdom over, and he's going along with it. Now Abner had consultation with the elders of Israel, saying, in times past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. And in addition, Abner went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron all that seemed good to Israel and to the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner really does become David's advocate. If we want to ever get free of the Philistines, we need to get to be one kingdom. We need to give everything over to David, like God said years ago that he would deliver us from the Philistines. So I should have paid attention to that for the last 7 years, but at least he's come around now and he's going to work out a deal. And you can see how a covenant works. First he talked to one side, and he goes down. I guess he got some kind of letter of safe passage or something, because he comes all the way down to Hebron when they were at war before. And he's able to talk to David and try to work out this deal. And so Abner and David meet to try to work out this agreement. Then Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron. And David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, let me arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may be king over all that your soul desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Everything seems great. We've worked out a plan. Everybody's peacefully going to come over and all serve David. But there's one problem, and that's Joab. Abner killed his brother, right, in the battle. And he hates him. And he's going to blow this whole thing up. Oh, we'll have to come back next time and see how it's blown up. And we'll look at the transition to David becoming king of all Israel.